Okay, now I'm delighted to be joined by Luna Beck, who's an amazing singer-songwriter that I first came across way back in October. So I was just working that out. It's about 7 months ago. So hi Luna, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, good. So for people who don't know you and don't know your music, you're currently in London right now, but you're actually originally from Yorkshire, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I grew up in Leeds, but I've lived in London for a good few years now.
Okay. So when we first met, it was quite an interesting situation because you were working, you had a day job doing something else, and we just started chatting, and I was kind of showing you around this kind of event space, and I remember I can't remember how we started the conversation, but I asked you something around what you do, and you kind of, I wouldn't say you let slip, but you told me that you were a singer songwriter, you're a musician. I was like, oh right, okay, I'm interested in that. And then you asked you if you had your music available to listen to online. But as soon as you started talking about music, I could see your eyes light up. Right, that's the thing. That's when you know that that's someone's real passion. And I could just tell immediately, even without listening to your music, I knew you were going to be good. Right,
Ah,
just
how did you know?
the way you were talking about your music, and I thought, right, this lady's going to be good. So I went back to my desk and I listened to your music, and I was blown away. Like immediately, I just loved your songs. So ever since then, I've been wanting you to be involved in Startup Week in some capacity and trying to figure out how to do it. I was hoping that you would be able to come and do like a live performance at the physical event, but today instead we're doing the interview, and then you're going to do a performance that we're going to play later on. But do you want to talk a little bit about the kind of a lot of people who are talented, they have a day job obviously, and then they do their passions in their spare time. So do you want to touch on that, or kind of the tensions or the challenges or opportunities there of the things that you really really want to do,
Mm,
you need to pay the bills, and the challenges of funding.
sure. Yeah. So I think first and foremost for me, it's about outlook. So I have a lot of the time people are asking me, oh, what do you do? What do you do for a living? So I say I do music. Oh, but do you do that for a living? Is that the only thing you do? People are very curious about,
Yeah.
but are you making money? Are you this big success? And so I have my perspective on it is that my work is everything that I do. Some of that work makes some money, some of it makes a loss, some of it makes lots of money. But I don't I don't place the value on the work that earns the most money. The value is coming from what I want to be doing. That's my life energy. So I think of work in that way. So um, also within that, I suppose I've been lucky, but I also made a decision very early on in my life that I only wanted to do the kind of work that used my talents and my skills and and had some meaning to me, even if it wasn't all exactly what I want to be doing. Um, so I've kind of developed ways of making money that are related to my other skills. So um, for years and years, I played covers gigs. I did a lot of playing that kind of music, but I found that it took me away from like developing my own style. So um, because I make and record and produce and stuff, I have sound engineering skills. So, and because I actually trained as an actress, I also could do voiceover. So I kind of brought those things together and started producing podcasts.
Yeah.
So I produced podcasts for businesses and do a little bit of interviewing and so on. It's quite nice because I developed the editing side of myself, which actually also feeds then into my music work, because I have to do a lot of editing, especially now everything is online. I'm spending half the time sort of crafting stuff for social media, editing it together, and I quite like that stuff as well. So it's sort of, I found my inner geek through doing that kind of stuff. So I still feel that I am I'm going along with my bargain that I made with myself about doing work that still satisfies me, even if it's in slightly different field sometimes.
Yeah. No, I get that because, well, it's all creativity, isn't it? It's just different ways of expressing yourself. And I mean, I know that years ago, I can't remember if I told you, but years ago, I used to be a kind of DJ producer, have my own club nights, have my
Yeah.
own label. And I was always the kid at school that had the records before anyone else. I had like an encyclopedic knowledge of labels and production credits and stuff like that. And what started as a hobby, like a bedroom DJ, developed into playing a few more gigs and then a few more gigs. And then I started producing music. And then I thought, wouldn't it be great to get a record signed? I got a record signed. And then it just built and built and built. But then got to a point where I stopped enjoying the music because I was spending all my time trying to make a business out of the music, if you know what I mean. I was trying to make a living out of the music instead of doing the love and the enjoyment of it. And I was kind of critically acclaimed, commercially not that successful. I think I might be more successful now. I've got a few more business skills around it, but I kind of fell out of love with music for a while because of that, because I was just so focused on trying to make a living out of it. So have you ever had moments like that where you've been pushing so hard to make your music successful and
I think I've experienced that in a different way. I think what I'm going to take from that is about doubt. So I think doubt is a constant companion on any creative path, and there's never going to be a point where you stop having it. It's just like, what's your relationship with it? So for me, I think I have to keep renewing that sense of, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? It's not for some kind of external validation, because if it is, I'm going to be quickly disappointed. Even you see how the culture of social media encourages people to compare themselves. There's always going to be someone ahead, always going to be someone younger, fitter, prettier, more talented, with better connections. So it's a losing battle. So I suppose I rather than get sucked into that, I try to just come back to where do I get my satisfaction? And that really honestly is from inside. It's from doing the work that I want to do and making it good. And so yeah, I guess I've never fallen out of love with it in that sense, although I've had a period where I took a break, but that was because I just went through a really, really difficult time in my life where I lost the well of creativity. I couldn't find my drive, and it was that moment where I realized that the drive was always the only important thing. Because in my early 20s, I was kind of often feeling dissatisfied, like, why do I not get my break? When is it going to happen? But I took for granted that I actually just had an endless amount of drive. And when it stopped, I realized that was the strength. And so when it came back, I was like, okay, now I'm on it. Like, I'm not going to let this go. So
no, I get that. So where do you get your inspiration and your drive from? How do you keep yourself inspired?
Yeah, I was thinking about this because I think obviously in a general way, it's just being alive. But I mean, I started writing songs when I was a teenager, and I did it because I had to. Like, I did it to try and make sense of like strong emotions I was experiencing. So I did it just kind of out of a sense of survival. And I guess to some extent that persists now, in that I have a relationship with it. Like it's what I have to do sometimes to kind of process my stuff. And then, yeah, I think it's not just so I take inspiration from just experience, my life experiences, but it's not just as simple as things happen and I write about it. There's a sense of, I have to allow my experience to penetrate in a deep way, and then there's a space that opens up, and in that space, that's where creativity arises. So I think of it in terms of creating the conditions. That's my job. My job is to create the conditions where the inspiration can come in and then like blossom. So that's definitely one way I look at it. Then also, I mean, obviously I'm inspired massively by other humans who are doing brilliant things, like people I can look up to, writers, other artists. I'm always trying to stretch my mind, expand my mind, learn new things, absorb new ideas from people I see who have, particularly, it's artists or writers or activists who are carving a path that didn't exist before. So these are the kind of people I take a lot of inspiration from. I just like 3 days ago, I read Audre Lorde's essay on the uses of the erotic, and I'm like still buzzing from this. It's so exciting. I heard a lot about her, and I've been meaning to check out her work, and then I read this, and it just like it's a game changer. And those are the moments for me that to just kind of ignite that fire again. If I'm sort of starting to veer off and looking at Instagram too much, and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing. So yeah, lots of reading and listening to other artists, music songwriters that I can connect with, because it's not easy to find those people, but you've got to. So I think of them sort of like ancestors in a way. You have to channel them, and so I suppose a lot of things really, and then in another way, just the simple stuff of taking care of myself, getting out into nature, being like meditation, just stuff that kind of creates a ground for the more exciting stuff to happen.
Yeah, no, amazing. Yeah. So we talked about you. Do you want to talk about your name? Because I heard like Luna Beck. Do you want to explain where that comes from?
Sure. So I feel like I'm quite ruled by the moon. I feel like moon energy. I have a strong relationship with that, and obviously it's very feminine. There's a kind of mystery around it, and I feel that kind of connects to my process as a writer. And I also to bring in other elements of places that meant something to me. So as I come from Yorkshire, there's a river, the River Lune, and so that kind of came together nicely, and also water. So I'm like I've got like a strong watery quality to me, and obviously Beck. I don't know if Beck is a stream everywhere, but it definitely is where I come from. So I kind of like the idea of the Beck, and also now I live in Tooting Beck, so that seemed to make sense, like bringing together these elements of home. And but what I really liked about it, after I kind of came up with this, that a friend of mine said to me, it's nice because you have this round sound and then a sharp sound, so it's not all just kind of poetic and flowing and love and light. It's like bang, which I think is also part of my personality as well.
Yeah, and do you think that comes through in the songs themselves? Kind of.
Well, you tell me. I mean, I don't know. I hadn't thought about that, but I think I never know whether the name. I think about this with people as well. Like, do you grow into the name, or does the name define you? But I think it does. I think it's both. I think because music is really, it's just an expression of me. So when people say, what kind of music do you make? I often say, well, it's like me in music form. I mean, so it's an expression of who I am. So I think it fits. But what do you think?
Well, I thought that was your name. I didn't question it. I just
It is my name. It is my name. Yeah. I may have other personalities, but this one right now, that's my name.
I know, but it fits, and I think it suits the music as well. And it's interesting about the whole lunar thing. So there's a good friend of mine. She's really ruled by the lunar cycle.
Ah.
I've just been kind of learning about that in the last couple of months, and that's fascinating. That's not something I've really paid much attention to before, but the whole the new moon and the full moon and all that. Are you into all that sort of stuff?
Well, I mean, I'm into it in the sense of just from my own felt experience. I'm not sort of reading about it particularly. It just makes sense to me. Obviously, as a woman, I have like a monthly cycle as well, and that's connected with the moon. And I'm very in touch with kind of the different moods that come up within that. And because I think the thing is, what you can harness the insights that arise in different moments, and that's just something that I've noticed by being human over the years. So it's nice when it's confirmed by science or whatever, but I don't really need that to happen. I'm just aware, like, there are certain times that are maybe more fruitful, and full moon energy is just so intense that it's got to be creative. Yeah.
It's this ancient thing that people have kind of forgotten, and then
Yeah,
still affecting us now. So
completely.
you mentioned it before, but there's this friend of mine told me about on Instagram. There's a thing called moon omens. If you follow moon omens
Okay.
every day, it basically explains what's going on with the
Nice.
worth checking that out. But
Yeah, will do.
you talked about the whole like feminine like energy and power. I think there is a real strength to your music as well, right? So it's very feminine, but it's very strong as well. And then I'm going to sound like really naive here and really stupid, but like there's obviously masculine power and masculine energy, but like I think there's a real strength in the female feminine power and strength in your music, but also in particular the Power to Change song and the video that you used for that. What really struck me was it's all about climate change and how to tackle that and how to fight. But your video, it's mostly women. It's mostly teenage girls in there. And when you see a lot of the protests that go on, it's usually women doing this. So that just really struck me about that song and video and just your music in general.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that video specifically, but it's true. And I think now you mention it, I suppose there is something of the feminine in the fact that it's a protest song in a way, but it's not sort of violent or aggressive. So I say,
if it was a male, it would be
possibly. I mean, I suppose it's one way of looking at male and female energy, and I think obviously because we live in a patriarchy, we get used to this idea of strength being force, and the limit of that is kind of violence, and that's not what strength is, and I definitely think vulnerability is obviously a big aspect of strength, but also just skillful means. I mean, like passion and wisdom, they're strengths, and I think they're associated with a kind of feminine power, and I think maybe that's also what the world needs more of right now. Yeah.
No, definitely, yeah, and empathy, all these things. So
yeah, I'm sort of loath to call them like theme. I think the thing is we get confused because we think, oh, men are like this and women are like that, and it's not, right? Because we have a combination of both energies. Everyone does, and I certainly have lots of masculine energy as well. But I think that because we've been living in this patriarchal system for so long, it's become entrenched, so that like men aren't taught to connect with their feminine energy. And there's a brilliant book that I read recently about this called Mask Off by J.J. Bowler. Do you know that book?
I've seen you sharing it online, yeah. So
yeah. Which it's good, and it really goes into that that sense of masculinity as a mask, and that it's like how patriarchy isn't really helping anybody, not even men, even though they may appear to be in this dominant role. And so I'm into all that.
I'll have to add it to my list. I'll have to read it. I've got my bookshelf behind me to try and make me look intelligent, but there's some good books behind there. But I am into, I've been on a bit of a spiritual journey in the last sort of 6 months, getting really into all this sort of stuff. And a really good book called Infinite Possibilities that I read at the end of last year, which is all about how your thoughts become things, and how you it's not a new concept, but it's been around a long time. But it's all about how if you really want something, like it's all about getting in tune with what you really want, and then focusing on that like every day, like really, really focusing on it. But don't just think about it. Actually, follow it up with some sort of action that gets you closer to that. And I've I have experienced that. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Just like if you dwell on negative things, chances are you're going to make things worse. But if you focus on
Yeah.
positive things,
Yeah.
you can make things better. It's not to say that bad things don't happen, but it's just where you focus your energy. So
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think, yeah, it's not about sort of trying to suppress the bad things that happen, but that like acknowledging that all challenges are going to arise, but then you do always have a choice about um, how you relate to them, and that's the main choice that you have. And that coming back to inspiration, that's something that I look for in people that I read, or like at the beginning of the lockdown, I just had this urge to read Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Do you know that book? He's a Holocaust survivor, so he was a psychoanalyst, therapist, and he was taken to Auschwitz and the concentration camps, and he writes about, yeah, like how do you find meaning in the most darkest of places.
yeah.
And so I'm really fascinated by people who've been in these kind of situations and like managed to kind of find something positive in it, or find something. And that's sort of, yeah, I mean, in a much less traumatic and drastic way, I suppose that's what I
Yeah.
try and do.
No, I get it. I mean, some people watching this will be probably bored of me talking about it, but something I kind of another friend of mine told me about was stoicism. And I didn't realize. I think I'm a stoic, but I didn't actually realize I was.
You're stoic, but you didn't know it.
But just when you get into that, do you know much about stoicism?
A little bit, actually, yeah. But
So,
tell me more.
just the thing that I really like about it. So there's a famous book called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, who's the Roman emperor. So Hadrian's Wall was only a bit of a bastard, right? But his son was a pretty nice guy, like very highly regarded. But he was a Stoic, right? And the main gist of Stoicism was accepting that bad things are going to happen and people are going to behave badly, but you can't really control what happens in the world and what happens. But the one thing you can control is how you respond to those things. You've got a choice at any moment how to react. So that's basically what the Stoics were trying to do, was be in complete control of their responses to situations.
Right.
Trying to see trying to see the positives and the negatives, and their whole thing was again about the pursuit of wisdom. So they just love learning and pursuit of wisdom, and not only learning about it, but sharing that knowledge with others as well through writing or any other form. So that just really resonated with me. That's kind of what I'm into. So I'm trying to be a good Stoic. I'm trying to be, and music's another way of sharing your wisdom and your ideas.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting to hear you talk about that, because it's come up for me a lot recently, and I'm coming from a Buddhist tradition. I studied and practiced in Buddhist meditation for 10 years, and there's a lot of crossover in what you say in terms of, the Buddhist perspective. You start from the understanding that life is suffering. So yeah, like you said, bad things are going to happen, but then with meditation, you're trying to create a kind of space in your mind so that you can choose how to react to some degree. I mean, I'm sort of making it much smaller than it is, but there's definitely that kind of parallel in terms of you're not trying to, which I think I sometimes find like our contemporary culture is about just everything is great. Let's just pretend that, everything's, fine. And don't cry. Let's just go out and get trashed. And that doesn't work for me. Like I like to feel and process stuff that as it's happening. I call it like my emotional laundry.
Yeah.
So you got to do that, but then you have a choice. Well, if I'm going to dwell on that, so again, like the what I've learned from the Buddhist teaching is that you're always meditating on something. So if you meditate on a negative thought, that's just what you're doing. That's what's in your mind. That becomes habitual. So it's like creating a space so you have a choice, basically, to what you choose to cultivate and what you choose to let go of. And so, yeah, it's, I guess in a way, there's just wisdom is not, it doesn't belong to any tradition. It's going to be coming up in a lot of different traditions.
Well, they all influence each other, don't they? And yeah, so but that's something that's definitely helped me kind of at the start of this year, and with the lockdown, the whole kind of Stoic philosophy. And so how have you been coping with the lockdown then, with your creativity? Is it making you more creative or less creative?
Yeah, well, I think, like I said, because I've done a lot of retreats in my time, and in some ways, this reminds me of a long retreat, sort of enforced retreat that everyone is doing. So it's bizarre, suddenly. So with the similarity being that your distractions recede and you're kind of honing in on your own devices. And there is a deliberate kind of squeezing effect on a retreat, which is sort of happening here, where this limitation creates a sort of pressure cooker. So for me, I found that can be creative if I can tap into it. And yeah, I've written a few new songs. I've sort of gone into a sort of contemplative mode, which I quite like going into anyway. And also, like, there's so much to sort of think about what's happening and what's going to happen after, and how's it going to impact, and because it's a totally new situation. So that's going on. It's also been a time that I can just sort of play around with some of the toys I've got, like loop pedals and reverb pedals, and stuff that I need to just sit down and play around with. And the other thing is, I think that it's been a time to realize what do I really need to survive? Like, what's the kind of basics? And I realized that along with sort of eating, sleeping, and exercising, I need to perform. I needed to do live gigs. So I just found a way to do it. So I started doing live streams, and there was a lot of learning involved in that. I had to figure out, how to do the technical side, the sound, get the sound good, then perform the hosting. So there's a lot of stuff coming together, and I think I'm most creative when I'm learning. So that's been nice to sort of dive into and find an outlet that way. And the other thing I've been doing is I decided to do this sort of crowdsourcing music video, which is still in process. So if anybody wants to take part, I've invited people to sort of send clips of them dancing along or singing along to this song, which is my latest single, Come Over Tonight. And because I sort of wanted to make something like a creative memento of this weird time, because, Come Over Tonight obviously is a bit ironic because that was the one thing that no one could do. But then at the same time, I noticed how everyone's Zooming all the time and like speak to people that maybe they wouldn't even have been speaking to before. I've reconnected with my sister, who kind of wasn't really talking to me for a year, and suddenly we're playing Pictionary on Skype, and so I think it's also been this like possibility of connection. And at the live stream gigs, suddenly there are people tuning in from Thailand or Vermont who just wouldn't have come otherwise. So I think all of that has been sort of stimulating for me creatively. But I mean, I'm selling it like it's been this most amazing time. And in and amongst all that, obviously, there has been the kind of lows of nothing's happening. I'm so lonely. I need this kind of social energy that I can't get. But I think, the main thing I would take away from it is that is necessity being the mother of invention. Like, I had to innovate because I needed there's certain things to happen, need an outlet for my music. So that's been kind of, and I think a lot of people, when I speak to people about what they've been doing, experimentation seems to be key in this time. Like some of the sort of perfectionism can let go, and it just feels like everyone's trying stuff out because we have to. There's no kind of baseline. It's just anything goes. So I think that's quite nice as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I've noticed. It seems like you are doing a lot more online. You know, you are. I've watched some of your performances online, and so you, like you say, it's kind of forcing you to do it, and you need that outlet. So yeah, it's and you different platforms as well. So you seem to be more active on some of the different social media platforms than you maybe were before.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not. I don't want to live my life online. I was sure like nobody does, but then if that's what you've got, then you just have to make the best of it, don't you?
So, well, obviously we'll put links underneath this, but what's the best way for people to follow you and find you?
Well, I suppose the thing is, it depends what kind of a user you are. Like, how do you consume? I hate this word, but music. I mean, so my Twitter, Instagram handles are all Luna Beck Music. Then probably Google searching is like, well, that's what I do for anything. I'm on Spotify, I'm on iTunes. So if you like to sort of stream, then you just find Luna Beck. And I do have a website, lunabeck.com, and Bandcamp, SoundCloud. And there's just so many platforms these days. YouTube. Yeah, I'm doing it all.
You're everywhere. Well, I've bought all of your songs on iTunes.
Thanks.
So, yeah, I bought every one of them, including the remixes as well. So.
Oh yeah, what's your take on this? Because I know that like I don't really know what sort of style of music that it was that you were doing or are still doing.
Well, I'm not doing anymore. Maybe I'll come out of retirement. I keep getting people saying I should come out of retirement, but also it was. I mean, I like every type of music, literally every genre of music. But when I was DJing and making music, it was more kind of house and techno and breakbeat type style music. So don't know, maybe I'll do a remix of one of your songs.
That would be fun. Yeah. I'm loving the remix thing. It's really interesting.
Are they the only two, or the first two remixes you've had?
They're the only two for that song so far. But yeah, I guess there's no limit really.
Well, I'm like I say, I hung up my headphones a long time ago, so I don't even know what genre they are now. But I mean, is it Mammoth? His kind of.
Yeah, his is future bass. And Tendril, who also does a lot of future bass, he said, well, we had this Insta live chat, and he said that he was experimenting with drum and bass, which wasn't a genre he particularly knew, which was interesting in itself because it's not a genre that I mean, I don't really feel like attached to genres, and I don't really know how to describe my music. And I don't really want to be stuck in one anyway. I think that's pretty normal nowadays. A lot of singer-songwriters are doing collaborations with all sorts of different producers, and so I'm not fixed in any one bracket. And I don't really know how to describe music in words because it's music. That's the point of it, So, but I understand that we have to put labels on things. But
that's what I was going to say. Like, because it's, I guess, shorthand. Sometimes we say it sounds like such and such, or she sounds like this. But yeah, how would you describe your music, or do you not?
I was going to ask you to do that.
Oh God!
What do I sound like? Who do I sound like? Because it's really hard from the inside to know what you sound like. All you know is what you put in.
Yeah, well, I think you have got a unique sound, but again, maybe I just haven't been listening to a huge amount of music in recent years. I mean, I have, but I've just in the last few months, I've been rediscovering all my old music, and then I've got music on constantly all the time now, and I've been discovering a lot of new music as well. But I don't know. I'm kind of loath to say it in case you're offended by.
No, I won't be.
No, I don't want to say. I don't know. Again, it's quite. Is it folky? Is it folky?
I'd say, yeah. If so, I do have to describe it a lot, obviously. And I generally say sort of, yeah, folky tends to come up. And the folky aspect, I think, is that I mean, it's not folk, obviously, because it's composed, but I suppose I'm inspired by more folky songwriters. You know, it's not pop in the sense of it's kind of got some more, maybe more depth, or in terms of lyrics, or not that pop isn't deep, like sometimes it is, but maybe just in terms of like some slightly social or political aspects to it as well. I guess that chimes with my idea of folk. But then I suppose the genres that I say, well, I'm influenced by jazz. That was a really early influence for me. And I think I still bring in like jazz, funk, kind of at least harmonies, and also rhythms. And then elements of electronics starting to creep in now as well, with the recent stuff.
In Come Over Tonight, there's some more electronic sounds in there.
Yeah.
I really like, but they're subtle. You know, they don't overpower the vocals, because I think your vocals, you do have an amazing voice, and you do have a beautiful voice.
Thank you.
And I think it is kind of classic, timeless, I would say. It kind of sounds like maybe 60s style. Again, I'm rubbish with.
No, it's fine.
It's not dance music. I don't know what genre to say for a singer-songwriter. Anyway.
Yeah.
I could just imagine you playing big festivals like Woodstock or something like that. I don't know. That's the sort of thing I could imagine. Definitely, Power to Change is an anthem. I would say it is a real anthem for climate change. So I don't know. You obviously wrote it thinking about that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Whether it's been adopted as an anthem by anyone, but I think it's as good an anthem as I've ever heard for climate change.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, I did write it specifically for a indie filmmaker who was making this film short, and he wanted me to write a song for it specifically. The second time that's happened to me in my life, and I do quite like it sometimes, just have a brief, and then so it kind of it just came out of what was happening. And obviously it was a subject that I care about, but I was just so kind of inspired by these young people, and he interviewed them on this march and sent me the clips, and I just listened to that, and then I just kind of started writing. So yeah, I think that's one of those nice moments where you just have to be receptive to create. You don't even have to do very much.
Well, that is a brilliant song, and yeah, I love it. I mean, that was the first song I heard, and that was immediate. I was like, bloody hell, she's good. and then I heard Over. So again, love that as well. So do you want to say what Over's about, or do you not?
Yeah, I can say. Yeah, Over is a song that I wrote at a time when I experienced a number of losses, and specifically the end of quite a destructive relationship, at the same time as losing my father. So it's kind of there was like a double grief, and I suppose that, you know, like it led to a lot of contemplation of death and endings and beginnings, and what I suppose, yeah, what the meaning of life, the meaning of love. And I see repeat that in the song. You want to know what love is, because I think that's something that comes with death, or death of a loved one, is that you do have an opportunity. So I often talk about it as the gifts of grief, in that there's a lot of pain, but there's also something incredibly profound in that space of loss, where you can where you do really know what love is. So yeah, so I suppose that it's bringing those things together, and at the same time I was walking away from this relationship that was very damaging, and so it felt like I'd let go of everything, like everything I believed in or had relied on.
Yeah.
So
no, I got that. Well, that's why, because I could guess there was multiple interpretations of that songs. It was either losing a loved one, or the end of a relationship, and no, that is that again, another beautiful song that you've done there. You really, I was saying before, there's like how song meanings change over time. So in the time I've been listening to it since October, I've seen different people in that. Different people in that song, including myself in that song. It's like, oh, is it me that am I that person, or is it someone else? Right? So questioning yourself, and then and then the other one I've only just listened to this quite recently is Prove Me Wrong.
Oh yeah,
I love that one as well. So I mean, I want everyone to listen to your songs and hopefully buy them. But do you want to explain what that one's about?
Yeah, well, so that was the first song that I wrote after this very, very difficult time where I went to kind of a lot of depression after that, and I stopped writing. Like I said before, I didn't think I would ever write again. I didn't think I would sing. I couldn't. I just had no spark. And after quite a long period of time, like a year and a half, the thing that brought me out of it was actually dancing. And a good friend of mine got me in touch with dancing, this Brazilian dancing, which is called forró, this brilliant, like, lively music. And I went along, started dancing, and I started to feel joy again. I started to feel my body again. I started to realize that, like, there was life after death. And so that's when I started writing again. That was the first song that I wrote, was this kind of, it's like slowly emerging from this place of like real self-protectiveness, and so it's got this kind of sense of like healthy skepticism, like but also feeling like maybe there is a possibility for love, but I've got my walls firmly up, so you just prove me wrong. I'm going to start from the perspective that it's all dark and you can show me something different. So it's kind of tongue-in-cheek in that respect, I suppose, but yeah, it's a real celebration of life, I think, after a lot of letting go. And
no, I get that. Yeah, but I can see it's you say it's kind of guarded, but it's hopeful at the same time.
Yeah, it's like not denying the past, not just denying the, because it's learning. You have to learn from your experiences, otherwise you're just going to do the same thing again.
Yeah, I love it. And then, well, come over tonight and probably guess what that's about. You've got over that. You're ready to give it a go now. So for that one.
Yeah. I mean, that I think there's so many ways in which you can feel that song, and I think it's like it can apply to like a personal relationship, or family, or society in general. I see it as being about like on a deeper level, how do we have to learn to hold all of the darkness that is in the world, in terms of we can't just brush it under the carpet. Bad things happen and we need to be accountable for them. And I suppose that's one level of it, that we can't just sort of brush things away and make them okay. That's the job of being human, I think, is to hold it all. And that means like the dark and the light, the positive and negative. And I think that in terms of like a personal relationship, that's important. But also just in terms of like, people in society in general. And it kind of came into my mind with the remix that Tendril did because he just took he took these single words, body, mind, chaos, fear, weapons, rage, and it just made me see that, you know, that's what's happening in lockdown. It's like those people are to blame, or he's to blame. It's sort of like blaming, and that's not helping. That's not helping anyone. So yeah, I guess it's kind of got that in it as well.
Yeah, no, I like that as well. That it's coming up. It's talking about, I don't know whether it's a new relationship or whatever, but it's like you say you're willing to accept the kind of the not so great parts to them as well. You're accepting that as well, and you
Yeah, I write a lot about on this subject. An older song I did called "Perfect Love," and saying it's not a perfect love. And I think I'm quite focused on trying to accept the what's not perfect, and that's also because obviously love starts with yourself. So that's a lifelong journey for me, is to accept myself as I am. You know, I'm not very good at, I'm quite perfectionist. I've been harder on myself traditionally, and I've worked a lot on that. So I suppose it's also kind of that I'm trying to start with self-acceptance and then open it outwards.
yeah. Okay, well, from where I'm sitting and where I'm listening, I think you're pretty awesome. So
Thanks.
yeah, I think you're amazingly talented, and I'm sure you know that. I know every artist has doubts about what they do, but you are very talented singer, songwriter, and performer. So yeah, so I'm excited to see what you do, because you're going to record a special performance.
I am. I'm going to do that now, off the Zoom, and then I'll send it to you.
Awesome, right? And like I say, we'll be sharing links and everything. But yeah, thanks again. Really enjoyed talking to you. And
Yeah, I've enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
do what you're doing. Hopefully, we can get you back out there gigging as soon as possible.
Yeah, well, I want to come to Newcastle. I want to come and gig there. I loved it when I was there just for that short time. Great energy.
Sort that out. Okay, all right.
Excellent.
I'll stop the recording. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Bye.